planning, better outcome, and is actually the seventh week. 7 weeks has been going by pretty slow and pretty fast at the same time. So there's this ambiguity that's there, but that's how I'm coming into this, and it's actually pretty exciting going through this week. And so what we're actually going to talk about today is a second part of relational problems. And so the title of this is actually called solution driven direction. So the last week was called problem driven direction. This week is called solution driven direction. And last week we did talk about more of the problems. We talked about what the stated problem is and what the real problem is, that heart problem. But now we're not going to really just focus and center everything on just the problem. We're not going to be drowned in problems. We're actually going to get to the solution a little bit. And so it's going to be pretty exciting just to be able to do that. But to talk about problems for a second, there are so many problems that we can bring up. There's so many problems that we want to address as nonprofits in the community, and so many that we actually probably can, and so many that need to be addressed. But the thing is that we need to answer the question of where do we start? And how do we know the best place to start? I think a lot of us, we have a solution and we think that it works, but we just don't know where to even start in addressing that problem with a solution. And so this tactic is actually going to be really helpful in figuring out simply and singularly where to start in addressing a problem. And the approach that I like to take is called these 3 A's. And so the 3 A's are ability, acceptance, and authority. Ability, acceptance, and authority. And we're going to go over all 3 of those A's singularly. And so we're going to start with ability. Ability meaning, what is your capacity as a nonprofit? What is your functionality? What is your effectiveness as a nonprofit to be able to address a problem? I think a great question to ask when it comes to ability is, on a scale from 1 to 3, how well does your program already provide a solution for that problem? Not in the future, but how well does your nonprofit already provide a solution for that problem? And what that does is, on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being not very well, 2 being in the middle, sort of, somewhat, and 3 being we do it very well. And so you want to look at ability first, because if you don't have a high capacity or ability to address a problem, why would you want to start there? It makes no sense. Maybe you are being influenced by external factors or external players like the municipality, like the state, or like the federal government, or other nonprofits or other financiers. Well, maybe those aren't the people that you can be partnering with at that time, because you just don't have the ability to actually meet the need in which that you may say that you can, and they want you to, but you just can't actually meet that need. And so this really helps in really defining and bringing light, shedding light even to, what are we already good at? What is our ability? And if we have a low ability, probably is not wise to start there. If we have a high ability, well, maybe it is something that we can look at a little bit more. The second one is acceptance. And so when I say acceptance, I mean the community buy-in. And to go back to something that we talked about a while ago when we talked about community buy-in, is doing this need assessment. And so that's why it's so vital. And that's why I strategically said to do the need assessment prior to this, because if you haven't done the need assessment, you're not going to be able to answer the question of how much buy-in do you have from the population you're serving. And so when it comes to the acceptance, if you don't do this need assessment, you're not going to be able to answer this question. On a scale from 1 to 3, how much does the population you're serving actually see the problem being a real problem for them? How much does the population served see what you see as a problem to be a problem for them? And if you don't do a need assessment, you're not going to be able to figure that out. But you want to do on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being that they really just don't see it as a problem, 2 being sort of in the middle, and 3 being they see it as a huge problem. And one of the examples that I've actually been currently working on is opioid use again, but to be more specific this time, one of the causes of that problem of opioid use or opioid overdoses was that of someone being double diagnosed. And so what that means, if you don't know what that means, is that you're diagnosed in the realm of substance abuse or in the realm of substance abuse resources, but also in the realm of mental health resources. And so I'm diagnosing you on in two different areas, but they have no cohesion. They're not working together. There's no interconnectivity that's there. There's no collaboration. And so what ends up happening is that you're being diagnosed with different medication in two different areas, thus being called double diagnosed. And that was one of the things that not only the nonprofit said was a problem, but when they thought about their participants and they were able to reach out to them, they really thought that, wow, they actually do see this as a problem as well. Some of them are like, I had no idea that was a thing. And so that's okay. But you want to figure out if your participants or the population you're serving has no idea, well, maybe they just really don't see it as a problem, or maybe it's sort of in the middle and they just don't know that it's a problem. And so you want to be able to figure that out, but the need assessment is very helpful. But starting out with you asking your organization on a scale from 1 to 3, how much does the population you're serving actually see the problem you identify as a problem? The last A we're going to go to is authority. And so authority simply just has to do with how much outside support do you need, not to run your program, but how much outside support or external support do you need to actually have an impact in the area that you want to be impacting in? How much support do you need to actually have an impact on the problem that you are trying to provide a solution for? Not in context of support for the program, but more in context of support in having an impact in the community. And so I think a great question to ask is, on a scale from 1 to 3, how much support does the government, the municipality, the state, the federal, different hierarchies there, but also other nonprofits, how much support does those entities or do those entities really have in providing a solution for the problem that you're trying to address? How much support do those entities provide in providing a solution for those problems that you're trying to address? And so what happens is that maybe when your one would be low support. We really don't need a lot of support. And so in that, if you really don't have a lot of support to be impacting in this problem, well, then you would say that you have a large authority. You have a high authority because you don't need a lot of support to be impacting in the community. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you're a 3 and you need a lot of support, well, then you actually have very low authority. And what that means is that you need assistance, you need help, and you can't actually be as impacting as you want without external players. And so there's something to really consider. So those 3 A's really, as you bring them together, help us to figure out where to start. But what I love about those 3 A's of ability, acceptance, and authority is that it provides a story. And so here's what I mean by that. Say that you are a 3 in all those areas: ability, acceptance, authority. Well, the storyline is this. In this problem you're trying to address, you have a high ability. So you have a high capacity, you have a high effectiveness, so you can be able to do really well in addressing that problem. You also have the buy-in from the community, and a very high one at that. So they're going to be on board to whatever solution that you provide because they know that this is a problem. But then lastly, you have a high authority. To be impacting in that problem, you don't need to be relying on so many outside or external players. And so thus, you can be a little bit more self-reliant and a little bit more so organization focused rather than collaborative focused. And so that's the storyline you get of, wow, I can really have a change here. But maybe on the other end of that spectrum, you are very low in all these areas. So if you have a low ability, well, then it's probably not best for you to address that problem because you probably just can't at that moment. but also low acceptance. Well, if you have low acceptance, well, then even if you try to and attempt to address that problem, the people that are actually going to provide support and show how impacting your problem is, they're not on board. So it's not actually, you're not going to get the results that you want or are looking for. But then thirdly, you don't have a high authority, you have a low authority. So you have to be relying on other players to actually have an impact. And it's going to be a lot more conversations and meetings than you actually being on the ground, grassroots stuff, trying to actually make an impact on the community. And so those are the different storylines you can get. And there's just a mixture of them, as a mixing bowl of different storylines that come about. But that's what I like about these 3As. It provides a story. And for us as nonprofits, we need to figure out what story we're telling. We need to figure out what story we're already at, and then to be able to tell a different story from that. But a general rule of thumb from this is you want to go with the highest scores. So say that you are large in authority, high in ability, and high in acceptance. Well, those are three L's, so three larges or three, there's a lot of those. And then that ends up being your highest score. And so there's different combinations where you can go, but ultimately you want to go with the highest score. And the highest score in those three areas, that's where you want to start. That's just generally where you want to start. And you usually want to have 2 to 3 entry points. So all those causes of this main problem that you're going to come up with through this fishbone diagram, you're going to do these 3As in each one of those areas, each one of those causes of those problems. And you're going to be able to identify 2 to 3 entry points where you have high scores. And so say, of course, sometimes it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the ideal situation. And so say you don't have all three large, you don't have where you're at a place where you have a large authority, large acceptance, and large ability. Well, maybe you just have 2 of those larges. Maybe you have a large ability and large acceptance, but then you have a medium authority. Well, that score is still possible to have an impact. You just may have to be a little bit more reliant on other people. And maybe you have a low authority. Maybe that's one of your highest scores, and you still go with that because that's where you can bring about a change and be a little bit more impacting. But you just have to know this is something that we have account for. If you have a low authority, we have to account for being able to reach out to other people and other organizations to have the impact that we want. And so ultimately, to wrap this together, this is an approach, a practical to be able to help all of us, all of you guys, all nonprofits to understand where to start, what problem to address first. And you have a lot of solutions, but you want to start with the solution that really highlights the problem that you can actually address right away. And then once you do that, and once you figure out how impacting you are in that problem, then you can start to figure out other problems that you can tackle. But this approach really helps you in figuring out which problem to actually address first with the solutions that you already have. And so what we're going to do next time is we are going to just review the entirety of the theory of change, because I've talked about different segments of it. I've talked about the need assessment. I've talked about the problem-driven approach or direction. I've talked about the solution-driven direction. And so now we're just going to put all of it together and tie this bow, and to be able just to review it all encompassing together rather than in parts. So review it in whole rather than in part. And that is what we're going to go over next time. But for this time, it's called solution-driven direction, and it's all about these 3As of ability, acceptance, and authority, which helps you guys to figure out what problem to start addressing right away with immediacy, and to move forward from there. So that is the end of this. And do you guys have, I'm now open for questions if you guys have any.
I always try to let other people go first, but okay, here I am. When you talk about the authority, is it is it the idea that you need to have the support, or is it a want? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah. It's more of a need.
Okay.
Especially when you're looking at if you're able to be as impacting as you really want to. So I guess a mixture,
Mhm.
but ultimately it looks at how impacting you want to be on the community. And say that you aren't able to be as impacting because you require outside assistance.
Mhm.
Well, then that ends up falling into line with a need. Like you need other people to be able to be as impacting as you really want.
Okay. Okay. And then that support is encompassing like everything, right? People, finances, or is it more of a support of other organizations when you
More of the latter, other organizations. So
okay.
anything that's not finances can fall under other organizations as well. But I would say more so it's outside of the funders and
Okay.
your people specifically, but more of
Mhm.
the like government or other nonprofits that you need to be on board with you.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Awesome. So if there are no more questions, that is it for this time. And what I will do is make sure to send this out to you guys right away after I end the call. So I will see you guys next week.
Excellent. Thank you, Jameson.
No problem. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.